Sometimes the biggest value comes by asking the stupid question, the ones that get to the heart of the problem that no one else wants to touch. By the time I was handed a procurement issue on my way out of a UK role and ended up saving the business £500,000. How? By challenging the obvious option. Welcome to Busting Roadblocks, the podcast where we break down the biggest roadblocks in business and help you clear a path to success. I'm Janet Charters, your host and the founder of JC Consultancy, where we help businesses remove barriers and unlock their full potential. Now let me set the scene for you. We're in the UK. I've been here about 4 years now. And honestly, as much as I loved my time at the UK, and I really did love my time in the UK, the winters, particularly at that time, were quite challenging. And the summers, the 1 week in April and the 1 week in August, equally challenging. Now, don't get me wrong, since then I have seen the weather improve. So obviously me leaving helped UK weather, as the weather improved when I landed in Melbourne and broke a 10-year drought. So maybe I'm really good at bringing weather as well as busting roadblocks. So this 4 years of really tough winters and some equally tough summers led me to go, actually, I'm quite keen on heading back to the Southern Hemisphere. Now, at that time in the UK, your notice period was 3 months. When someone hands in their notice, you usually take things off them, take projects off them, particularly key projects, for a couple of reasons. They're about to leave, so their commitment to the business is reduced. But also, you need somebody else to start doing that role, at least until you find somebody else to replace them. And I was worried about that because my personality is I need to be kept busy. So I went to the business unit manager and I said, look, is there any projects that you need me to work on for the next 3 months so that my time here can be used effectively? And fortunately, he said, yes, there is. We have a procurement problem. So yes, you might go, that's really unusual. Let's give a marketer a procurement problem. But, I already had established a reputation for problem solving beyond just driving top line growth. If you've seen in any of my previous podcasts, I was in the UK during the GFC. So I had changed from a beautiful, fluffy marketer who loved going to Centre Court and having pims and lemonade and doing lots of TVCs, etc., to how do I save money and how do I get results to the bottom line immediately. The problem was really interesting. This is where we're going to start to talk about colour, bugs, and bold questions, all right? So the roadblock that sat in front of the business as they saw it was, we have a price increase on an ingredient for one of our core products. The product, this is incredibly unsexy, was jelly. Perhaps that is sexy, who knows? So I've got a price increase, red natural colour. We were faced with about £1 million price increase. We have to keep producing this product. It's one of our biggest SKUs. This is a no-brainer that we have to continue to do it. How do we do it without annoying the customer the most and therefore not losing any volume? So when you think of natural red colorings in food, we have a few options. You have things like beetroot, pomegranate, annatto can be used, and even hibiscus. But if you are looking at products that need to stay on the shelf for a long time and stay pink for a long time, or undergo any kind of heat processing, cochineal is your solution. Now, this might worry a few of you because if you look at cochineal now, you'll find out that it is a bug. At that stage, it was a bug that was grown in the UK by farmers, and they were making good money off it. Chuck a whole lot of bugs in a field, I'm assuming this is how it was done, breed them, get them off to processing. At that same time, though, the price of rapeseed oil was increasing. So farmers were converting from cochineal to rapeseed. As a result, and those of you who are familiar with any kind of economics will know that if demand remains the same and supply drops, price increases. So we were faced with about £1 million price increase across our key SKUs. This is the biggest jelly producer in the UK, and they did private label jelly as well. The interesting thing about private label is the big supermarkets had determined quite early on that their base product, so their own brand product, was not going to have artificial colours in it. So their solution or their push to make sure that we kept natural colouring was quite important. The really interesting thing about natural colouring, in this case it was red colouring, is there's a few sources, but they're not all created equal, right? The solutions that were offered to us were, let's choose a alternative natural ingredient, an artificial colouring, and that would be probably have to be only on our core range, right? Unless we could convince Tesda, Asda, Sainsbury's, Morrisons, Aldi, Lidl to change, which is going to be highly unlikely. So we sat down. What was presented to me is, we've looked at this procurement, we've looked at this. This is the solution. We go with beetroot held up the longest over time, and the combination of another colour looked the most red. The problem is, holding the longest over time meant it lasted without fading for almost 6 months. Now, the joy of having jelly as a product is it's really shelf stable. This is not jelly like what we see in New Zealand and Australia in the powdered form. It's almost like having a small little chocolate bar, and they're partially jellified cubes, and you'd crack off a couple of cubes, add hot water, and you'd be making your jelly. So the colour was really important. We're not just looking powder at the bottom of a little bag. This is actual jelly that people can see through the packaging and see the colour of it. Having a long shelf life product that faded in 6 months was less than ideal. And consumers in general, particularly when they're passionate about a heritage brand and a heritage product, will complain more. And on top of that, jelly is consumed predominantly, and not only, but predominantly by children or older people. Now, any kind of artificial flavours and colourings put into products that are generally consumed by children is a big no-no. You're going to get backlash for that. So we had a problem with consumer complaints that were going to be, because my product's fading, what have you done with it? And consumer complaints because now you've replaced my natural product with an artificial product. I don't think it's a stretch to say that once you lose consumer confidence in your product, particularly heritage products, it's quite hard to get it back. So we wanted to make sure we were protecting that. Any product where you have a natural colouring is going to be preferred over artificial colouring. So I asked the stupid question, is there a middle ground? Is there a world where we can use some cochineal and some of the beetroot? Because if the cochineal gives us the colour over time and the stability of the colour, and beetroot gives us a cost savings, surely we're kind of getting the best of both worlds. No, we haven't eliminated the total cost increase that we're facing, but maybe we've reduced its total impact, and definitely reduced its impact on consumers and the consumer complaints that we would receive. I am really happy to ask dumb questions and ask them until the answer makes sense. I don't presume to know anything. I don't presume to be the food tech. I don't presume to be a procurement expert. I don't presume to be an engineering expert, but I'm not an idiot. So when you give me an explanation and top line rational, I say, that doesn't really make sense. There's got to be another solution here. I'm going to keep asking until your answer makes sense to me. The procurement person and the food tech went, actually, that's not a bad idea. Let's do some accelerated shelf life testing and see what we can find. So we managed to reduce the percentage to below half in all of the products. So that, plus adding obviously the beetroot cost into it, I ended up saving the business £500,000 on my way out. As you can imagine, they did ask me to stay and offered me other roles. You just came in, focused on it and fixed it. But little did I know that the summers were going to improve in the UK as soon as I left. Otherwise, maybe I would have considered it. But I was destined to head home and head towards the Southern Hemisphere. I didn't make it home. For those who don't know, I actually ended up living in Melbourne for another 8 years before I finally decided to come back to New Zealand and settle here in Taranaki. So I guess the key insight and key takeaways here are not that the roadblock wasn't solvable, because I think eventually people would have got there, I think the key insight is asking those really stupid questions and challenging what everyone believes to be the solution can lead to quite significant financial impact. We switched the colour, we didn't switch the whole colour. So the result was a product that could still claim natural colouring, no consumer complaints, fantastic. And yes, a cost increase, but the cost increase was half as much as what we expected it to be. So that's a procurement problem solved by a marketer, by thinking differently. If you find this podcast valuable, make sure you subscribe and share it with your network. And if you have a business challenge you'd like me to cover, reach out on LinkedIn or at jcconsultancy.co. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What roadblocks are you facing right now?